I was asked to originally to talk next week and give you an analysis of the results of the election. But since the elections are this Sunday and I can't be here next week, I'll give you an analysis of the results of the election ahead of time. The reason I say that is because for those of you who follow Latin America, you know that it looks as though, and you can't predict the result of any election in a democracy, a functioning democracy, which Colombia is today, thanks to the government in power there and the governments in power here until the present. It looks as though the candidate of the party of President Uribe, Juan Manuel Santos, is going to, well, is expected to win. This wasn't the case just a few weeks ago in the first round of elections, where there were half a dozen candidates, and they split the vote, so they're going into a runoff, actually 4 weeks ago. And in fact, at that time, there were several polls that showed that Mr. Santos was behind the former mayor of Bogota, a college professor by the name of Antanas Mockus, who was a Lithuanian, a descendant of Lithuanian immigrants to Colombia, and a very colorful individual whose candidacy would probably not be favored by most people in this room, but was favored by Hugo Chavez and others. Chavez at the time said that if Santos was elected, it could lead to a war between Venezuela and Colombia. Chavez has predicted war between Venezuela and Colombia a number of times over the last 10 years. And it could very well be that Chavez's brazen intervention in the electoral process had an impact, but probably not the one that he wanted, because Juan Manuel Santos came within 3 points of getting the necessary votes to win in the first round, which is much better than anybody had expected, close to 47%, whereas Mr. Mockus got about 26%. And the polls today indicate that Santos is about has about two-thirds of the votes. However, what a lot of observers are worried about, believe it or not, is that at the same time as the election this Sunday, you have a number of important World Cup games on TV. And I'm serious. The Miami Herald, I was in Miami on business this week, and the Miami Herald was reporting how worried the Colombians are that they may not turn out in force to defeat Mr. Mockus as he should be. Why is this election important between Santos and Mockus? Colombia, just very quickly, Colombia is a very important country strategically. If you look at a map of South America, it straddles or is the keystone, as I call it, of South America. It's the only country that has borders with both the Atlantic and the Pacific in South America. So obviously the Caribbean and the Pacific, the Andes Mountains, the Amazon, and Central America. Just geographically alone, it's terribly important. It's a large country, about 44 million people with vastly developed industry, agriculture, highly educated. They have coal, they have oil, they have minerals, and these are some of the reasons why Fidel Castro, for example, has been interested in undermining and destabilizing Colombia for the last 50 years and has supported guerrilla movements for the last 50 years. In the last 10 years, he's been aided enormously by Hugo Chavez. One reason Chavez hates Santos is because Santos was President Uribe's defense secretary. As such, he authorized a number of actions that has put the guerrillas on the defensive. If you look at the situation that Colombia faced 10 years ago, just on the eve, let's say, of the Bush administration, Bush 43, and that's when I came back into the government. Colombia, the debate in Washington was, when will Colombia collapse? and into whose hands? Will it be the far left, the FARC, the ELN, the other guerrilla groups that had become so powerful that the government did not control very large parts of national territory, or will it be the paramilitaries, really without much ideology, but people who were supporting organized crime and supported by narcotics trafficking? And they were estimated to be around 20,000 people on the left and about 10,000 on the right. They were vastly underestimated, certainly on the right, or on the paramilitaries. And when I say on the right, it's only as for shorthand, because they came out. These paramilitary groups emerged as a self-defense mechanism against the violence of the left, the brutality of the left, who would take over entire towns and massacre people and blow up all the houses and forcibly recruit the young people to join them. This is one of the reasons why they grew so much. When Uribe came in 8 years ago, the Bush administration immediately decided to increase the military assistance, intelligence sharing, economic assistance, and the situation in Colombia has completely turned around. It is a success story for American foreign policy, and I'll give credit, frankly, to the Clinton administration. It took them a while. It took them 3 years, actually, in the late 90s, but they did support Plan Colombia. And by the time the Bush administration came in 2001, actually 9 years ago, we were able to provide the kind of assistance that has made Colombia today a stable country, an economically growing country. The number of people, for example, the number of kidnappings, by stable, I'll give you a couple of examples. Kidnappings are down like 75%. Murders are down about the same amount. Internally displaced persons. There were millions of people internally displaced, running away from the violence, from the paramilitaries or from the guerrillas. They are way down. The economy has grown enormously, the number of jobs. I'll give you a little example. As Assistant Secretary, when I was being briefed for my job, I was told in 2001, there was a waiting list of 180,000 Colombians waiting for immigrant visas to the United States. 180,000 Colombians. If our embassy had stopped doing everything else and just processed those visas, it would have taken them 10 years to process 180,000 applications from Colombians. That exodus has now turned around. The Colombians are going back and taking their money with them because there was obviously capital flight. The capital was fleeing faster than the people, but there's now foreign investment coming into Colombia, domestic investment, and they're growing. And the United States deserves a great deal of credit for. I can tell you about that if we have time during the question and answer period. Back to the elections. The choice couldn't be clearer between Santos on the one hand and Mockus on the other. And I think, as I said, if the polls are any indication, it looks as though the Colombian people have recognized it, and they will put Santos in the presidential palace in Bogota. He was not only Minister of Defense, he's been Minister of the Treasury. Before that, he was Minister of Foreign Trade. It would be the equivalent of our USTR. He has just a great deal of experience. For our purposes, I can safely say, because I know him, I've talked to him, I've known him for many, many years, he's pro-American. He believes in individual freedoms. He knows that the way to grow an economy is through the private sector and the free market. He is very much, frankly, like his mentor, Alvaro Uribe. I won't spend too much time talking about Mr. Mockus because I have very little, frankly, positive to say, except it looks like the candidate of hope and change. If that sounds familiar, I think it will give you an idea of what would probably happen if Colombia falls into the hands of Mr. Mockus. So that is the analysis of what happened next Sunday in the Colombian elections. I actually hope, all kidding aside, that Mr. Santos wins. Now, how much time do I have? Plenty of time. Okay. What should the U.S. government do, regardless of who wins, obviously? Because even if it's Mockus that wins, we have to accept him at his word that he's going to maintain the good relations with the United States, and that he's not going to allow Chavez to interfere in the internal affairs, although some of the other statements he's made, which he's retracted, such as saying that he would consider extraditing both Uribe and Santos to Ecuador. Ecuador wants Uribe and Santos tried for launching a raid by Colombian special forces, very successful raid, into Ecuadorian territory, where the #2 commander of the FARC, the stands for Armed Forces of the Frente, the Colombian Armed Forces for Revolutionary Armed Forces. The #2 commander, Raul Reyes, was killed, along with a number of other military and civilian leaders of the FARC, and some laptops were recovered. I mean, the importance of this raid was the intelligence that was recovered that clearly showed the support that the Venezuelan government was giving and continues to give, but obviously up until that time is documented in those laptops, to the guerrillas in Colombia and in other parts of Latin America. There's so much information that the Colombian government hasn't even revealed all of it yet. Whenever Chavez says something that the Colombians don't like, they will publish some piece of information that embarrasses Chavez a great deal. But in the meantime, they've put enough information out that clearly shows the links between the Venezuelan government and violence, narco-trafficking, terrorism in this part of the world, particularly inside Colombia. What the United States should do is support that government, ideally the Santos government, particularly in two ways, or specifically continuing this military assistance. Plan Colombia, which is now over 10 years old, and which has had these beneficial results that I mentioned, and happy to go into others. And by the way, unfortunately, the Obama administration has given signs of going wobbly on us when it comes to Plan Colombia. They've reduced some of the assistance, saying, well, the Plan Colombia has worked. Maybe there's no need to continue it at these levels. You know, the war is still going on. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the numbers of the guerrillas on the paramilitary and the Marxist fronts were underestimated. Again, when I came in 2001, the figures I was given for the FARC were, for example, I think 18,000 for the FARC, 5,000 for the ELN. Those are two on the left. Maybe half of them have been killed, captured, defected. There have been very high-level defections, very high-level captures, and killings, like Reyes and others. And deaths, for example, just even old age, the original head of the FARC. We should take some questions. Okay. But they're still there. And on the other side, the paramilitaries, we estimated in the State Department maybe 10,000, 12,000. 30,000 paramilitaries have laid down their weapons in the last 9 years in Colombia. So we were way under. Now, some of those, of course, perhaps joined later on, but we were way off target when it came to the number of people we thought were fighting the central government. And if that war isn't won, it will come back in Colombia because of some of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. It's just far too important strategically and in wealth for the left, which is the only violent movement that remains in Colombia in an organized fashion, to leave alone. So let me stop there, and there's lots of other things we can talk about.
Go ahead and take some questions. Sorry. Okay, go ahead, Ken. Here we go. Ken Timmerman.
Hi, how are you? Can you comment at all on the impact of the Israeli effort to help the Colombian government and to train them in counterterrorism?
Well, one impact has been the level of vitriol, of hatred, directed at the Colombians by the international left, by Chavez, for example, that has called the Israelis terrorists, and not the only example. I mean, just this week, well, this week, I guess, Fidel Castro said that the Israeli move against Gaza was equivalent to a Nazi, to Nazi terror, and that the Israeli flag had been replaced by the swastika. That's the kind of language that the Castro-Chavez axis and Correa, by the way, Correa being the president of Ecuador, has used to a lesser degree. We should not underestimate Correa's anti-Americanism, and I hope somebody will ask a question about that, because our Secretary of State was just there in Quito making friends, or attempting to, with Correa. But as far as the impact, Chavez is building his own left-wing terrorist group of allies. It was designed in Cuba, in Havana. It's funded by Chavez, and with Venezuelan oil money, and it includes Bolivia, it includes Ecuador, it includes Nicaragua. It was going to include Honduras until that was stopped, and you see by the reaction of the international left against the events in Honduras, calling it a coup, and accusing the then government of President Micheletti of being illicit. By the way, something that the State Department inexplicably joined, our State Department, the Obama State Department. You can see how upset they were, that their plans were upset. They see on the way to stop this alliance called ALBA. It's what Chavez calls this alliance of leftist governments, and includes a couple of others, a couple of islands in the Caribbean. But I never mention them because these islands are so small and so poor that a few $1 million from Chavez makes all the difference in the world to them. And frankly, they've been bought off. That's just, that's realpolitik. No money, and somebody comes along and says, here, I want you to vote with me at the UN and the OAS, and say bad things about the Americans and say nice things about me, and here's your annual GDP in a loan that you don't have to pay back to me. It's very hard for some of these people to say no. But the others, the Bolivias, the Ecuadors, or the leaders of those countries, Nicaragua, they're doing it for ideological reasons. So let me just stop there, because I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Since Ecuador has pegged the restoration of diplomatic relations with Colombia only if they hand over the contents of those raw res computers, first of all, is there any reason whatsoever that it would be to Colombia's benefit to hand those over, or what do you see as the security ramifications if they were to do that?
Well, I've heard candidate Santos, Juan Manuel Santos, say that he doesn't regret anything about that decision. He was, again, the Minister of Defense. He gave the order to attack the camp. He approved the plans. And as far as I'm concerned, it was a brilliant, not only military move, but political move. And the reason it was brilliant politically is because of the treasure trove of information that was gathered. I'm not Colombian. And I'm not an advisor to any Colombian. I would say that if they wanted to turn these things over to the Ecuadorians, they should do it only after they've become public. I'd like to see the rest of the information in the computers, because what we've seen so far is really very interesting. And if they're holding some things back because perhaps they're very sensitive, I think the rest of the world needs to see them. The answer to your question is, I don't think that a Juan Manuel Santos would turn over those laptops or the information in them to the Ecuadorian government. But that's just my view.
Oh, I think we have time for one more very short question and short answer. Go ahead, Terry.
Can you explain why Uribe attempted to extend his term if he and then I know he didn't succeed, but if he's, such a great Democrat, I mean, I agree that he does seem, but that just seemed
Yeah.
unexplainable.
Let me just, a little background on that. When Uribe was elected, the Colombian president was limited to one term. He wanted to stay for 2 terms because he realized that what the reversal of that decline of Colombia could not be accomplished in 4 years that had taken place before he arrived. He did that completely democratically through the Congress, referenda, et cetera. Then, and he was reelected, he has over 70% approval. Then he toyed with the idea of doing it again. And his own friends, and here I can say myself included, urged him not to do that. What he said was, we're going to let the Supreme Court rule. If the Supreme Court rules that this is legal and constitutional, then I will consider it. There are a lot of people, and this I didn't get from him, but I got from people close to him, that he never was going to run for a 3rd term. But he wanted to see what, he wanted to let the constitutional process run its course. When the Constitutional Court, as they call it, which is part of the Supreme Court, ruled that he could not, then he said, I will not. And I think that's a great example, for example, to Chavez and Morales and Correa and all the others in the region, these leftists who are reaching power democratically, then changing the rules, buying votes in various ways, not necessarily one by one, and then staying in power indefinitely. So I think Uribe, bottom line, is probably a good way to end this, is the hero, certainly, of Colombia in not only the decade, but probably the century, is Alvaro Uribe. And by the way, George W. Bush, again, somebody who will never get credit, deserves a lot of credit for the way that he mobilized the government. And I know, from personal experience, he mobilized our government to make sure Uribe was successful in what he did.